Welcome to Stoic Origin. Let me ask you something. Be honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever noticed how some people stay calm when everything is falling apart, while others completely lose their mind over things that don't even matter? Same world, same pressure, totally different outcomes. Why? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. It's not intelligence that separates them. It's not luck. It's not even experience. It's how they think when emotions hit. And once you see this clearly, you can't unsee it. Most people go their entire lives believing they're logical, rational, and in control, when in reality, they're being dragged around by invisible forces they don't even recognize. Forces that hijack decisions, ruin relationships, drain confidence, and keep them stuck in the same cycles year after year. The ancient Stoics had a word for escaping this trap: clarity. Not positive thinking, not motivation, not hype. Clarity so sharp it cuts through excuses, fear, and emotional noise. And today, you're going to begin building that edge. Because what you're about to learn isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about becoming dangerously aware. Aware enough that manipulation stops working on you, pressure stops rattling you, and setbacks stop breaking you. Here's the question that matters right now. Are your decisions actually yours, or are they emotional reactions wearing a mask of logic? Most people never ask that question, and that's exactly why they stay predictable. Let's start with a brutal truth that changes everything once you truly understand it. Most decisions are not logical. They just pretend to be. People love to believe they thought it through, that they weighed the pros and cons, that they made the smart call. But the Stoics observed something far more unsettling. Emotion pulls the trigger. Logic just writes the press release afterward. Think about it. Anger convinces you to send a text you'll regret. Fear convinces you to stay silent when you should speak up. Ego convinces you to take risks you can't afford. Insecurity convinces you to chase approval instead of respect. Only after the decision is made does the mind rush in to justify it. That's not rationality. That's storytelling. And if this sounds uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is awareness waking up. I once watched a highly competent professional destroy his own momentum overnight. Smart guy, educated, articulate. On paper, he had everything going for him. He quit a stable position to jump into a can't-miss opportunity. His explanation? Market trends, timing, freedom, growth. The real reason? He'd just been passed over for recognition. His pride took a hit, and walking away felt like reclaiming control. The decision wasn't strategic. It was emotional. And here's the dangerous part. He genuinely believed his own explanation. That's how most people live. They don't realize they're being driven. They think they're driving. The Stoics trained themselves to interrupt this process in real time. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about stepping back from emotional impressions before acting on them, not suppressing emotion, but refusing to let it decide the outcome. This is where dangerous intelligence begins, not by eliminating emotion, but by seeing it clearly before it hijacks you. Here's the discipline. The moment you feel a surge, anger, excitement, certainty, outrage, you pause. Not for hours, not for days, just long enough to ask one question. What emotion is pushing me right now? Not the story, not the justification, the emotion. Is it fear of losing status? Fear of being ignored? Fear of looking weak? The craving to feel powerful, respected, or validated? Most people skip this step, and that's why they stay reactive. Once you name the emotion, its grip weakens. Instantly. Now comes the second question, the one that separates thinkers from reactors. If I act on this emotion, what problem am I creating for my future self? That single question has saved careers, relationships, reputations, and self-respect. And here's where this gets even more powerful. This skill doesn't just protect you from your own impulses. It lets you read other people with unsettling accuracy. When someone lashes out, argues aggressively, or suddenly becomes defensive, the dangerously smart mind doesn't argue the surface logic. It looks underneath. Because people rarely fight over facts. They fight over identity, over pride, over fear. A coworker resists a new idea, not because it's bad, but because it threatens their relevance. A friend criticizes your progress, not because you're wrong, but because your growth makes them uncomfortable. A stranger attacks online, not because they're confident, but because they're insecure. Once you see this, you stop taking things personally. And that's real power. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to correct every idiot. You don't need to react to every provocation. You just need clarity. The Stoics weren't weak. They were precise. They understood that the person who controls their inner state controls the situation, no matter how chaotic it looks from the outside. And this is just the beginning. Because once you understand how emotion drives decisions, you start seeing the world differently. Patterns emerge. Motives become obvious. Manipulation loses its bite. If lesson 1 cracked the illusion of logic, this next truth shatters something even deeper. Because once you see it clearly, disappointment stops owning you. Here is the brutal reality the Stoics understood long before modern psychology put a name to it. Every human being acts according to what they believe serves them. No exceptions. That sentence alone offends people. It sounds cynical, cold, almost insulting. But it isn't pessimism. It's liberation. Most people spend their lives angry at others for failing to live up to imaginary standards. They expect loyalty without alignment, sacrifice without incentive, consistency without benefit. And every time reality doesn't cooperate, they feel betrayed. The Stoics chose a different path. They didn't ask, why are people like this? They asked, what is driving them right now? That single shift changes how you see everyone, friends, co-workers, partners, leaders, even yourself. Let's be clear about something important. Self-interest does not mean selfishness. It means people move toward what protects their status, their comfort, their identity, or their sense of meaning. Sometimes that looks noble. Sometimes it looks ugly. But the mechanism is the same. A coworker volunteers for extra responsibility. A friend gives advice. A leader makes a speech about values. A partner makes a promise. There's always a reason beneath the surface. Not a conspiracy. Not malice. A motive. I once had a mentor who appeared unusually generous. Always available. Always supportive. Always offering guidance without asking for anything in return. People called him selfless. What they missed was that he was also disciplined. Every interaction expanded his network. Every conversation sharpened his leadership. Every act of generosity reinforced his reputation. His kindness was real, but so was his self-interest. And here's the part most people get wrong. When I realized this, I didn't trust him less. I trusted him more. Because alignment is predictable. What breaks people isn't self-interest, it's hidden self-interest. The Stoics understood that expecting humans to act against their perceived benefit is like expecting fire not to burn. Seneca warned that misplaced expectations are the fastest path to resentment. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire filled with advisors, generals, and politicians, all pulling in different directions. He didn't demand purity from them. He demanded clarity from himself. He observed patterns. Who benefits if this advice is followed? Who loses if it isn't? What does this person gain? Not in theory, but in reality. Once you start asking those questions, confusion fades. You stop being shocked by betrayal. You stop romanticizing loyalty. You stop taking broken promises personally. Instead, you operate in reality. This is where dangerous intelligence forms. Because now, instead of fighting human nature, you work with it. You stop asking, why would they do this to me? And start asking, what do they believe this does for them? That question removes emotion from the equation. And emotion is what blinds most people. Here's a hard example. Someone says they support you until your growth threatens their position. Then the support fades. They didn't change. The context did. Their self-interest shifted. Another example. A colleague undermines you in a meeting while smiling to your face afterward. You think it's hypocrisy. It's alignment. They're protecting their status in public and their access in private. Once you see this, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. The Stoics never expected fairness from people. They expected consistency, and that's a far more reliable standard. This doesn't mean you become distrustful or bitter. It means you become accurate. You judge relationships not by words, but by incentives. If someone benefits from your success, they'll support you. If they benefit from your failure, they'll sabotage you, quietly or loudly. Neither makes them evil. It makes them human. And here's the uncomfortable part most people avoid. You are not exempt. Your own decisions follow the same rule. You tell yourself stories about why you did something, but underneath, there's always a perceived benefit, security, approval, control, relief from discomfort. The Stoics believed self-awareness begins when you stop lying to yourself about your motives. Because if you don't understand your own self-interest, it will control you unconsciously. But if you do understand it, you can align it with discipline, integrity, and long-term outcomes. That's power. This lesson alone dissolves most resentment. You stop feeling used. You stop feeling let down. You stop feeling confused by people's behavior. Because you no longer demand that humans behave like ideals. You observe them as they are. And when you do that, you stop being naive, and you stop being angry. You become calm, clear, and extremely difficult to manipulate. In the next section, we're going to confront something even more dangerous than other people's motives. Your own self-deception. Because the most convincing lies are the ones we tell ourselves, and protecting those lies is how most people stay trapped for decades. There's a reason most people never truly change. It's not lack of intelligence. It's not lack of opportunity. It's not even fear of failure. It's something far more subtle and far more dangerous. They cannot tolerate the truth about themselves. The Stoics believed this was the deepest form of slavery, because when you cannot see yourself clearly, you surrender control of your future. Most people live inside a carefully constructed story, a story where they are competent, reasonable, misunderstood, or unlucky, but never the root cause. That story feels safe, familiar, protective, and the mind will defend it at all costs, even when that story is quietly destroying their life. I once worked with someone who constantly complained about being overlooked. Promotions passed him by. Opportunities never came. Leadership didn't appreciate talent. According to his story, he was a victim of circumstance. But when you observed his behavior, a different picture emerged. He showed up late. He avoided responsibility unless forced. He clashed with teammates and blamed them for tension. When this was gently pointed out, he didn't reflect. He attacked. That's just how this place is. You don't understand the politics. I shouldn't have to change who I am. That wasn't confidence. That was self-deception fighting for survival. The Stoics warned that the mind prefers comforting lies over liberating truth. Why? Because truth demands responsibility, and responsibility is heavy. Once you accept that your actions contribute to your outcomes, you lose the luxury of blame. You gain power, but you also gain accountability. Most people choose comfort instead. They protect the story, and in doing so, they stay exactly where they are. Marcus Aurelius constantly interrogated his own motives. Not publicly, privately, ruthlessly. He didn't ask, "Who wronged me?" He asked, "Where did I fail to act with discipline?" That habit alone separated him from the masses. Because self-deception doesn't look like lying. It looks like rationalizing. I had no choice. That's just my personality. I'll change when things calm down. This isn't the right time. Those phrases sound reasonable. They are poison. They keep people stuck while making them feel justified. The Stoics believed that clarity begins where excuses end. And this is where dangerous intelligence truly sharpens. You start turning the lens inward, not with self-hatred, not with shame, with precision. You ask questions most people avoid. What pattern keeps repeating in my life? What feedback do I immediately dismiss? What criticism makes me defensive? Because defensiveness is a signal. It points directly at the truth you don't want to face. Most people run from that feeling. The Stoic steps into it. Here's the hard truth. If the same problems keep showing up in different forms, the common denominator is not fate. It's you. And that realization, while uncomfortable, is the moment freedom begins. Because once you own your role, you can change your behavior. And once you change your behavior, outcomes change. But there's a catch. You cannot evolve while protecting your ego. The ego wants to be right. The Stoic wants to be accurate. Those two goals are incompatible. Accuracy requires humility. It requires admitting, I was wrong. I handled that poorly. I avoided what I should have confronted. Most people experience that admission as a threat. The Stoic experiences it as leverage, because when you tell yourself the truth, you gain options, and options are power. This is why brutally honest people advance faster. They don't waste energy defending illusions. They don't need to maintain a false image. They adapt. While others repeat the same cycles, blaming new villains, the Stoic upgrades their internal operating system. And here's something even more unsettling. People who refuse to face their flaws don't just stagnate. They become hostile toward anyone who reflects truth back at them. That's why growth makes some people uncomfortable. Your progress threatens their story. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Your clarity exposes their avoidance. And instead of changing, they attack. This is not your problem. This is a sign you're evolving. The Stoics didn't seek approval. They sought alignment with reality. They believed the harshest critic should live inside your own mind, not outside. Because when you judge yourself honestly, external judgment loses its sting. You already know the truth, and that makes you resilient. Here is a Stoic practice that separates thinkers from pretenders. At the end of the day, ask yourself one question. Where did I lie to myself today? Not out loud, not for social credit, just for clarity. Did you avoid a hard conversation? Did you blame circumstances instead of preparation? Did you choose comfort over discipline? No drama, no guilt, just data. This is how you build an unshakable mind, not by pretending you're flawless, but by refusing to be blind. In the next section, we're going to talk about something most people are unprepared for, why your success will quietly provoke resistance, and how to handle envy without shrinking yourself. There's a painful truth most people only learn after they succeed. Your growth will make some people uncomfortable. Not because you did something wrong, not because you changed for the worse, but because your progress exposes something they've been avoiding. The Stoics understood this long before social media, before public metrics, before constant comparison. They knew that excellence has a cost, and that cost is often resentment. We like to believe success brings universal support, that if you work hard, stay ethical, and keep your head down, people will cheer when you rise. That belief is comforting. It's also false. In reality, your success acts like a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see reflected back. I've seen this happen countless times. When someone is struggling, they receive empathy, encouragement, advice. People rally around potential, but the moment that person starts winning, really winning, the energy shifts. Compliments turn into jokes. Support turns into silence. Concern turns into criticism disguised as honesty. What changed? Not your character, their comparison. Your progress forces an internal audit they didn't consent to. And rather than rise, many people choose to resent. The Stoics didn't romanticize admiration. They expected friction. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about being misunderstood, criticized, and envied, even while carrying the weight of an empire. His solution wasn't retaliation or withdrawal. It was detachment. He reminded himself that other people's reactions were not within his control, but his response was. This is where most people fail. They interpret envy as rejection, so they shrink. They soften their ambition. They downplay their wins. They apologize for succeeding. This is a mistake, because envy is not a signal to stop. It's a signal you're moving. Let me be clear. Not everyone who criticizes you is envious. But when criticism increases in direct proportion to your growth, pay attention. Envy rarely announces itself honestly. It hides behind sarcasm, behind just being real, behind moral posturing. You've changed. Don't forget where you came from. Must be nice. Those phrases aren't neutral. They're emotional releases. The Stoics saw envy as attacks on excellence. If you're not paying it, you're probably not advancing. And here's the part most people miss. Envy says nothing about your worth. It says everything about unresolved frustration in others. That doesn't mean you become arrogant or dismissive. It means you stay grounded. You keep your standards. You keep your discipline. You keep moving forward. because the alternative is worse. Shrinking to make others comfortable costs you your future. I once watched a capable entrepreneur stall his own momentum because of social pressure. When he struggled, his circle was supportive. When he began to scale, they became distant, critical, mocking. Instead of accepting this as part of the process, he internalized it. He slowed down. He stopped sharing goals. He made himself smaller, not to protect others, but to protect belonging. Years later, he admitted something painful. He wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of outgrowing people. The Stoics warned against this trap. They believed it was better to walk alone with integrity than to shrink for acceptance. That doesn't mean you abandon people. It means you don't let their discomfort dictate your trajectory. Here's a crucial distinction. Envy becomes dangerous only when you take it personally. When you do, you start negotiating with your potential. You start asking, how can I succeed without upsetting anyone? That question has no answer. Someone will always be upset. So the Stoic asks a different question. Am I acting according to my values or reacting to other people's insecurities? That question restores clarity, and clarity restores strength. You don't need applause to proceed. You need alignment. The Stoics believed that external validation is unreliable currency. It inflates. It crashes. It disappears when you need it most. Internal standards are different. They don't fluctuate with opinions. When you measure yourself against effort, discipline, and character, envy loses its power. You stop performing for approval. You start operating from principle. This is dangerous intelligence. Understanding that resistance does not mean you're wrong. It often means you're ahead. And when whispers start, you don't flinch. You don't retaliate. You don't explain. You don't dim. You stay consistent. Because consistency exposes envy faster than confrontation ever could. In the next section, we're going to break another illusion, one that affects every relationship you have. Why every interaction is an influence attempt, and how seeing this clearly makes you impossible to manipulate. There's a truth hiding in plain sight that most people never fully accept. Every interaction is an influence attempt. Not always malicious, not always calculated, but always directional. Someone wants you to think something, feel something, or do something. Once you truly understand this, you stop being emotionally reactive, and you start choosing deliberately. The Stoics were not paranoid. They were observant. They didn't assume bad intentions. They assumed interests. And that distinction matters, because the moment you believe people are purely neutral, you become easy to move. Consider how often you felt pressure without realizing where it came from. A story framed to spark guilt, urgency designed to rush your decision, flattery meant to soften your resistance, outrage crafted to pull you into a side. These are not accidents. They are tools. Most people don't recognize them because they mistake tone for truth. The Stoics trained themselves to hear beyond words. They listened for motive. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by advisors, generals, and philosophers, each confident, persuasive, and articulate. If he judged advice by delivery alone, the empire would have collapsed. Instead, he asked silent questions. What does this person gain if I agree? What changes if I refuse? Why now? Those questions cut through theatrics. Let me give you a modern example. You meet someone after years apart. The conversation feels warm, familiar. They remember details. They ask about your life. You feel seen. Then, halfway through, the shift happens. A pitch, a favor, an ask. The friendliness wasn't fake, but it was strategic. Most people feel betrayed when this happens. The Stoic feels informed, because they never assumed neutrality to begin with. Here's the key point. Influence does not require bad intentions to be effective. Many people genuinely believe they're helping you, while still trying to move you in a direction that benefits them. That's what makes influence so powerful. It doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like care. Advice from a friend may be sincere, but still shaped by their fears, experiences, and limitations. Pressure from a boss may be framed as opportunity, but driven by their need for results. Public outrage may feel moral, but still engineered to direct attention, behavior, or allegiance. Once you see this, you stop absorbing emotional energy blindly. You pause. You detach. You evaluate. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you sovereign. The Stoics believed freedom begins when you separate stimulus from response, not by withdrawing from life, but by observing it clearly. Here's where most people lose power. They react to how something is said instead of why it's being said. Tone hijacks reason. Urgency overrides judgment. Emotion becomes the shortcut. And the moment that happens, choice disappears. This is why influence thrives on speed. Act now. Don't overthink it. Everyone else agrees. This is your chance. The Stoic hears these phrases and slows down, because speed favors the persuader, not the thinker. Dangerous intelligence is not loud. It's calm. It asks one silent question. What am I being nudged toward? Not aggressively, not defensively, curiously. That question alone breaks most influence attempts, because persuasion relies on unawareness. Once awareness enters the room, the spell weakens. This applies everywhere. Work, relationships, media, social platforms. When someone praises you excessively, ask why now. When someone shames you, ask what behavior they want. When someone demands urgency, ask who benefits from your haste. You don't accuse. You observe. And that's the difference. The Stoics didn't try to escape influence. They accepted it as part of human interaction, but they refused to be unconscious participants. They chose deliberately. That choice is what made them unshakable. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. You are influencing others constantly. Your words, your silence, your reactions. If you're unaware of this, you act clumsily. If you're aware, you act responsibly. This awareness creates ethical power. You stop manipulating accidentally. You stop pressuring unknowingly. You communicate with intention. The Stoics believed responsibility increases with awareness. Once you see influence clearly, you cannot pretend innocence. You either act with integrity, or you become what you despise. This is why clarity is dangerous. It removes excuses, but it also grants freedom. You stop being sold. You stop being rushed. You stop being emotionally cornered. You choose. And when you choose, you live on your terms. In the next section, we're going to reach one of the most important lessons of all, one that determines who you trust, who you keep close, and who you must distance from, why patterns matter more than promises, and how ignoring this truth costs people years of their lives. There is one mistake that costs people more time, energy, and self-respect than almost anything else. They trust words instead of patterns, and it ruins careers. It ruins friendships. It ruins lives. The Stoics warned repeatedly against this error, not because people lie constantly, but because people reveal themselves gradually, and most observers refuse to accept what they see. Hope clouds judgment, potential overrides evidence, and promises become emotional currency. But here is the reality that dangerously intelligent understand. What someone does repeatedly matters more than what they say once. Every time. People are always showing you who they are, in how they treat people who can't benefit them, in how they handle small commitments, in how they behave when there's nothing to gain. The signs are rarely dramatic. They're subtle, and that's why they're ignored. I once worked with someone who was charismatic, ambitious, and endlessly reassuring. He spoke about loyalty, about long-term vision, about shared success. At first, the cracks seemed insignificant. He exaggerated small details. He bent rules when it was convenient. He missed minor deadlines and explained them away convincingly. Nothing worth blowing up a relationship over. So I didn't. I told myself the same thing most people tell themselves. It's just stress. He means well. No one's perfect. But patterns don't disappear. They accumulate, and eventually they escalate. Years later, when real stakes were on the table, he did exactly what his behavior had been rehearsing all along. He protected himself. At my expense. The betrayal felt sudden. It wasn't. It was predictable. I just didn't want to see it. The Stoics understood that ignoring patterns doesn't make them go away. It just delays the consequences. Marcus Aurelius judged people by consistency, not charisma. He distrusted dramatic declarations and emotional speeches. He watched behavior, Who followed through when it was inconvenient? Who acted with integrity when no one was watching? Who treated small responsibilities casually? Because small actions reveal operating systems, and operating systems determine outcomes. This is why promises are cheap. Anyone can promise when there's no cost. Patterns emerge when keeping your word requires sacrifice. Most people get trapped because they confuse potential with reality. They see who someone could be. They imagine who someone might become, and they build trust on that fantasy. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They believed it was foolish to gamble your future on someone else's hypothetical growth. Hope is not a strategy. Evidence is. Here's the hard truth. If someone consistently disrespects small boundaries, they will violate big ones. If someone habitually avoids accountability, they will abandon you when accountability is required. If someone shows dishonesty in trivial matters, they will justify it when the stakes rise. This isn't negativity. It's pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is survival. The Stoics weren't naive idealists. They were realists with discipline. They didn't hate people for their nature. They adjusted expectations accordingly. That adjustment is what protects you. This lesson is especially brutal in relationships. Romantic, professional, personal, it doesn't matter. People stay too long because they listen to apologies instead of observing behavior change. I'll do better. It won't happen again. You know that's not who I really am. Words. What follows is what matters. A sincere person changes behavior. An insincere person changes tone. And tone is easy to fake. This is where dangerous intelligence becomes lonely, but effective. You stop explaining away red flags. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop sacrificing your future to protect your present comfort. When the evidence is clear, you act. Not dramatically, not emotionally, decisively. You adjust access. You reinforce boundaries. You reduce reliance. You don't argue with patterns. You respond to them. And here's the paradox. When you begin trusting patterns instead of promises, your relationships actually improve. Why? Because you stop rewarding inconsistency. You invest in people who demonstrate reliability, not potential. You stop trying to rescue. You stop trying to fix. You stop trying to convince. You let behavior do the talking. The Stoics believe peace comes from alignment with reality, not wishful thinking. This lesson alone can save you years. Years of misplaced loyalty. Years of emotional confusion. Years of preventable regret. And once you internalize it, something shifts. You no longer feel betrayed easily, because betrayal no longer surprises you. You saw it coming, and that foresight is power. In the final section, we're going to confront the most seductive enemy of all. Comfort. Why it feels safe, but slowly weakens you. Why the Stoics voluntarily chose difficulty. And how choosing discomfort on purpose is the fastest way to build an unbreakable mind. Comfort feels harmless, warm, earned, deserved. It whispers, you've done enough. Relax. You're safe now. The Stoics saw comfort very differently. They saw it as a slow, silent enemy. Not because comfort is evil, but because unchecked comfort weakens you before you realize what's happening. Most people don't collapse under pressure. They decay under ease. Think about it. The body doesn't fail from one hard workout. It fails from years of no resistance. The mind works the same way. When life stops challenging you, something inside you goes dull. Your edge softens. Your standards slip. You stop pushing. You stop questioning. You stop sharpening yourself. And then, when real difficulty finally arrives, you're unprepared. This is why the Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort. Not as punishment, not as self-denial, but as training. Marcus Aurelius could have lived entirely in luxury. He didn't. He chose responsibility, hardship, cold mornings, long campaigns, and constant pressure. Not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he understood something most people miss. If you don't choose difficulty, life will choose it for you. And life's version is rarely gentle. I once watched someone with extraordinary potential slowly lose momentum. Not because of failure, but because everything became easy. Good paycheck, predictable routine, minimal risk. At first, it felt like success. Then something subtle happened. Curiosity faded. Urgency disappeared. Growth stalled. He wasn't failing. He was drifting. When disruption finally hit, industry changes, layoffs, competition, he wasn't ready. The strength he thought he had was borrowed from stability, not built through challenge. The Stoics warned against this illusion. They believed comfort creates dependency. Dependency creates fragility, and fragility collapses under stress. This is why they chose discomfort on purpose. Cold exposure, simple food, hard conversations, mental discipline, not to suffer, but to stay ready. The modern world pushes the opposite message. Avoid discomfort, optimize convenience, escape friction. But friction is where strength forms. Every time you avoid what's hard, you train weakness. Every time you lean into difficulty, you train resilience. Dangerous intelligence understands this. It asks a different set of questions. Where am I choosing ease over growth? What am I postponing because it feels uncomfortable? What challenge would change me if I faced it consistently? Most people know the answer. They just don't like it. Speaking up instead of staying silent. Training when motivation is low. Learning a skill that exposes ignorance. Ending what no longer aligns. These moments feel small. They aren't. They are the crossroads where strength is built or lost. The Stoics believed courage wasn't dramatic. It was quiet consistency. Doing what needed to be done, even when no one was watching, applauding, or rewarding you. And here's the final, most liberating Stoic principle. Memento mori. Remember you will die. Not as a threat, as clarity. This truth strips away nonsense instantly. Petty drama, endless comparison, chasing approval from people who won't matter in 10 years. Gone. When you remember your time is finite, comfort loses its hold. Urgency returns. You stop delaying what matters. You stop tolerating what drains you. You stop wasting energy on trivial battles. You begin to live deliberately. The Stoics didn't obsess over death. They used it as a filter. If this were my last year, would this matter? If time were short, would I still hesitate? If today were my last chance, what would I finally do? Those questions wake you up. They turn life from passive to intentional. And that is the ultimate form of dangerous intelligence. Not manipulation, not domination. Clarity. Clarity that frees you from fear, distraction, and self-deception. Clarity that allows you to choose growth over comfort, truth over illusion, discipline over impulse. You've now walked through these lessons, not as ideas, but as tools. What matters next is application, because philosophy that stays theoretical changes nothing. If this video sharpened your thinking, even slightly, do not keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs clarity, and subscribe to the channel Stoic Origin, so these principles stay close when life applies pressure. And before you leave, make one quiet decision. Choose one area where you'll stop choosing comfort. Just one. That's how transformation begins.